World War II was a conflict defined not just by battles and strategies, but by the terrifying weapons that shaped them. These weren't just tools of war, they were instruments of fear, capable of making entire armies hesitate, and commanders rewrite their plans. Today, we recounting down the 10 weapons that struck the most profound psychological terror into the hearts of their enemies. Kicking off our list at number 10 is the Soviet PPSH-1 submachine gun. Imagine being a German soldier on the Eastern Front. Suddenly, the air is torn apart by a sound like a chainsaw ripping through steel. That's the PPSH-1. Firing at an astonishing 900 rounds per minute, it was a bullet hose. Soviet infantry, often charging in human waves, would unleash a storm of lead that was simply overwhelming. The sheer volume of fire, and its distinctive, terrifying sound created panic, making German soldiers feel like they were facing an unstoppable tide. At number 9, we have the German Panzer IV medium tank. While not the most powerful, it was the workhorse of the German armored corps, the most produced and most common tank they fielded. For Allied tank crews, this meant constant dread. Every corner turned, every hill crested could reveal a Panzer IV. Its reliability and effective long-barreled cannon meant it was a constant, deadly threat across every single theater of war. The fear it inspired wasn't from its size, but from its ubiquity. It was everywhere. Coming in at number 8 is another German icon of fear, the MG42 machine gun. Allied soldiers didn't call it the MG42. They called it Hitler's buzzsaw, and for good reason. With a blistering fire rate of over 1,200 rounds per minute, it didn't sound like a typical machine gun. It produced a continuous, terrifying ripping sound, like tearing cloth. On the beaches of Normandy, a single, well-placed MG42 could pin down entire companies, turning landing zones into killing fields. The psychological impact was so immense that Allied doctrine shifted. Infantry assaults often had to wait for heavy artillery to silence the buzzsaw first. Next, at number 7, we fly to the Pacific with the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0. When the Zero first appeared, it sent a shockwave through the Allied air forces. It was faster, climbed quicker, and could outturn anything the Allies had in the sky. For an American pilot in 1942, seeing a Zero on your tail was practically a death sentence. It dominated the skies, its agility and performance creating a myth of invincibility. This superiority bred a deep sense of vulnerability and fear among Allied pilots, forcing them to develop entirely new tactics, like the thatch weave, just to survive an encounter. At number 6 is a weapon so effective it transcended its original purpose. The German 88mm gun, initially designed as an anti-aircraft gun, its high velocity and flat trajectory made it the most feared anti-tank weapon of the war. Allied tank crews lived in mortal terror of the 88. It could knock out a Sherman or a Churchill tank from over a mile away. Long before the Allied tanks were even in range to fire back, the shell would arrive before the sound of the gun, meaning a tank could be destroyed without any warning. This created a feeling of utter helplessness, a constant fear of an unseen, untouchable enemy. Breaking into our top 5 is the Soviet T-34. When the Germans invaded the Soviet Union, they were confident in their armored superiority. Then they met the T-34, and everything changed. Its revolutionary sloped armor could deflect German anti-tank rounds, which simply bounced off. Meanwhile, its powerful 76mm cannon could easily destroy German Panzers. For the first time, the seemingly invincible German tank crews felt true fear, and it wasn't just 1 or 2 T-34s. They were being mass-produced on an unbelievable scale, swarming the battlefield in huge numbers. The psychological shock was immense, giving birth to what the Germans called T-30 for phobia. At number 4, we have the American Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress. This wasn't terrifying for soldiers on the ground, but for the German fighter pilots sent to intercept it. A lone B-17 was vulnerable, but they didn't fly alone. They flew in tight, interlocking defensive formations called combat boxes. A single bomber had 13 heavy, 50-caliber machine guns. A formation of them created a fortress in the sky, a flying porcupine bristling with guns firing in every direction. For a Luftwaffe pilot, attacking these formations was a suicide mission. You had to fly through a dense wall of lead from dozens of guns, an impossible choice that instilled a deep sense of dread and attrition. Now for our top 3. At number 3, the terror goes beneath the waves with the German U-boats. For Great Britain, an island nation dependent on imports, the U-boat was the single most dangerous threat to its survival. Hunting in coordinated wolf packs, these submarines silently stalked the Atlantic, sinking hundreds of thousands of tons of vital merchant shipping. The fear they created was insidious and invisible. Sailors on convoy duty lived with the constant stomach-churning anxiety of a torpedo striking without warning from the cold, dark depths. It was a war of nerves, a silent terror that nearly starved Britain into submission. Our runner-up, at number 2, is the pride of the German Navy, the battleship Bismarck. At the time of its launch, it was the most powerful warship in the world. In its first and only offensive operation, it encountered the pride of the Royal Navy, HMS Hood, and sank it in mere minutes with almost all hands lost. The news sent a shockwave of panic through the British Admiralty. The Bismarck represented a strategic nightmare, a predator that could sever Britain's Atlantic lifeline single-handedly. Its existence caused such terror that the Royal Navy threw every available ship, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and even an aircraft carrier, into a desperate all-or-nothing hunt to destroy it before it could vanish into the vast ocean. And finally, the number one most terrifying weapon of World War II. It wasn't the biggest, nor the most produced, but no other weapon generated as much pure battlefield-altering fear as the German Tiger I heavy tank. When the Tiger appeared, it was like a monster from a nightmare. Its frontal armor was so thick that most Allied anti-tank guns couldn't penetrate it, even at close range. Allied tankers would watch in horror as their shells simply bounced off its hide. Meanwhile, the Tiger's own powerful 88mm gun could destroy any Allied tank from well over a kilometer away. Facing a Tiger created a feeling of absolute impotence and terror. It became a legend, a boogeyman on the battlefield. A single Tiger could hold up an entire armored column. Its presence on a sector was enough to change strategic plans. Its psychological impact was so profound that it led to Tiger phobia, where Allied soldiers would report seeing Tigers even when there were none. It wasn't just a tank. It was a symbol of seemingly invincible power that dominated the minds of its enemies, like no other weapon in the war. These weapons show that in war, the battle for the mind is just as critical as the battle for territory. The fear they inspired was a weapon in itself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this look into military history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content. See you in the next one.